And here to share her journey is the author of The Bug Who Thought He Lost His Buzz, is Kristen Barnett. Kristen, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning to you. Kristen, you have quite a personal experience with this, and in honor of Childhood Cancer Month, you are the only children book author that we have ever had on this program in over 1,200 episodes of Revealing the Truth. And so I want to bless you and welcome you to the Revealing the Truth family, and just was touched and moved by the whole story, the whole backstory of your life and what you experienced, and how in those waiting rooms, in those wards, in those hallways, as young children are walking with their IVs and their parents are struggling, that you were there too, but you were there ministering alongside of going through the same experience. So it is a powerful testimony, but I want to kind of go back in time, and I want to kind of take our audience to who Kristen was when she was little Kristen, because who Kristen is today was shaped and formed by her experiences, her faith journey, and those who mentored her when she was young to be the woman that you are today. Why don't you take us back to that upbringing and how you came to be who you are?
Yeah. So definitely grew up, I would say, in a Christian family. So grew up where, faith was at the core of our family. I will say, my first and biggest test, I mean, of course I had tests along the way, but biggest test in regards to faith was when my husband and I were going through a series of miscarriages, unfortunately. And, talking to other families that have gone through that's a big period, unfortunately, when especially women lose their faith. But for me, I definitely had what I would call a God aha moment through that experience. And so, to kind of back up into that story, my husband and I, there's now a test that a lot of families take at about 6.5 months of pregnancy that says, does your child have different malnormities? Are there issues through the pregnancy? And of course, my husband and I, no matter what, we're like, this child is our child, right? So we didn't go through this test to say whether this child was going to be our child or not. But through taking the test, unfortunately, we got a call from the doctor's office saying, we're the tests aren't coming back normal, and can you come in for an ultrasound and potentially an amniocentesis procedure? And so, we went in with a lot of faith, and let me tell you, we got this message while we were on vacation at Disney World, where my husband was buying, everywhere we went, he was buying something for this child, right? We were like way excited. Came back, got this message, and my husband was like, I just believe this is going to be fine. We went in, and unfortunately, while the procedure was happening, we had a nurse that left the room actually crying. So we kind of knew at that point, really not great news, right? And then the doctors came into the room, and he basically looked at the screen and said, if this child makes it to term, and that's a big if, that we don't know where we'll start. He's like, basically, this child isn't developing correctly. Also told us at that point in time that it was dangerous for my health, that I could hemorrhage because we were so far along, right? We were around like the 7-month time period of the pregnancy. And so, lots of prayer, of course, at the beginning, saying, miracles, everything else. But through the journey, we realized that wasn't God's plan. And so, the other thing the doctors told us, and, being a mother, Like I already, felt like a mother, of course. I mean, the baby was kicking, things like that. The doctor said this child will be in a lot of pain. And so, from day one, I basically knew what my answer was, but, had to let my husband, of course, go through his journey. We were in a small group at the time, which was great. So we had lots of people praying for us, which was amazing. But we finally came to the decision that yes, the pregnancy had to be terminated. But on the way to the hospital, and this kind of starts my God aha moment. It was very quiet, and I'm not a quiet person, as you can tell, and, was deep into thought. And basically, I had certain things in my mind that I needed to feel closure through the experience. So, we get to the hospital. Basically, the whole day goes through. And this is interesting. So, I did, the anesthesiologist came in. And I still can see his face. He almost looked like Paul Bunyan. And, some people were like later on saying, could he have looked like Jesus, right? But at the end of the day, when we got to leave the hospital, this same anesthesiologist came running down the hall. And of course, I was very happy to leave the hospital, right? Pretty traumatic day. And the anesthesiologist, I'm not kidding you, said word for word what I said in the car. And so of what I needed, which were things such as, and we named our daughter Hope. So we knew it was a little girl. And so basically I said, I want to see Hope again someday. And he was like, you're going to see Hope in heaven. And she chose you and you chose her for the small amount of time that she was here. Right. So so from that moment on, I mean, I always had my faith, but that in such a terrible time period, and this is what I talk to families about, is that God is there. There's light even through the darkness. And so when you say, what was kind of my faith journey, I think that's really, I had it as a child, but I didn't feel it. And I would say this is the moment that I felt, right, God. And so, I know later on we'll get into, as you said, my children's series, but I definitely feel like that feeds into these books, right, of bringing light into darkness.
Your journey involves what you would consider to be this kind of summation of Genesis 50, where Joseph is talking to his brothers and saying what you meant for evil, God would work for his good so that many would be saved. And yeah. The reason why God chose Joseph was because he trusted him. And he entrusted him with something, a dream, that had actually occurred 25 years before the dream actually came to fulfillment. And so your journey is very much like that, in the fact that through your loss, you wanted it to be not only heaven's gain, but for you to take this and capture your experience, your thoughts, your feelings, the difficulties, the challenges, and how to discuss and how to make people aware and how to bring comfort to an area that I don't know. And again, I will say that we're not a children's book program, so I don't know what resources are available. I've never been involved in this. And so I'm looking to you to kind of tell me, is there a great support system? I mean, I've seen the commercials for St. Jude Hospital. I've seen the commercials for other child cancer centers. I've visited with families, but I'm just not familiar. So maybe you can kind of frame for us in this Child Cancer Month, this Childhood Cancer Awareness, to help us become more aware of what kind of support is out there and why you felt compelled that you needed to write something at this particular level. And you have chosen a genre of children's books to carry forth a message to equip parents I want to make sure their audience understands this is not a book for children. It is a children's book for parents to take their child through a journey of understanding what they're going through, what they're experiencing, what lies ahead, and then even for a family, for siblings.
Yep.
So kind of frame for us, what is the support system that's out there? Are there resources available for parents to explain to siblings? Because now all the attention of the family is going to be taken from the 2 or 3 other children, and it's going to seem like they're being neglected and all the focus is on the sick child, and the shift in balance changes and the family dynamic is incredibly impacted. Are there resources out there, or is this what compelled you to write this book and start this series?
Yeah. So great. There's kind of 3 big points that you mentioned that I want to key in on. One of the big points is, what kind of resources and so forth are out there. I want to start out by saying doctors and nurses and the people, like you mentioned, St. Jude's, right? Hospitals, Ronald McDonald House, right? Are angels, in my opinion. And they don't get into this work unless they have a heart for it, right? Because it's day in and day out. I mean, you see miracles, of course, but you also see some of the hardest things that families have to go through, right? And they have to do that day in and day out. So I want to give them kudos as I say this, right? So to your first question about resources. And so one of the things that I found, because I did get that question a lot, right? I did get, do I tell my 2, 3, 4-year-old child that they have cancer? And if yes, how do I tell them? And I want to say at the same point in time that was going on, my husband and I were also in the adoption process of adopting our beautiful daughter, Riley. And people kept asking me those same questions, right? Of, are you going to tell her she's adopted? And how are you going to tell her she's adopted? And so I did go to both libraries and bookstores and so forth. And what I found out is for these types of topics, right, that are topics that are sometimes hard even for adults to talk about, let alone children, that there wasn't that many resources out there. So I found it for what I would say early readers to teenagers, but not that 2 to 7-year-old range. And unfortunately, children have to go through real life too. And so that's really what I would say spearheaded this series.
Well, it's interesting. I'm an adoptive father. I have a 29-year-old adopted daughter. I went through the full adoption process in California. I found, now this is 29 years ago, 1989, that what was provided for me through the adoption agency, the adoption attorney, and the guardian that was kind of the social worker that was put in charge of this, that they had a lot of pamphlets.
Right.
But when it came to the decision, do I tell Amanda that she's adopted, and do we explain adoption to her? And you have to make that decision. It's something you can't surprise them with at right. 15 years old, and that's like dropping a bomb on them. What do you mean? You're not my real parents, and why? That's a whole psychological grenade to lob in there. So you have to make that decision pretty early on as to whether or not you're going to raise your child with an awareness that they're adopted, and reframe it so that they're going to feel rejection. It's just to what degree.
Exactly. Yep. And I will say the interesting part is we did use our book of adoption. So with our daughter, when she was around 5. Now I will say from the day she was born, to your point, we had made that decision that we were never going to lie to her, right, about her adoption, that we wanted her to know her story because we felt that was part of her story. But there was obviously age appropriateness to it, right? And so it was really around the age of 5. And I will say my daughter's very perceptive, and she was also, so I say this, tongue in cheek, because to your point, they say it's really around ages 7 that children will start to really feel the rejection piece, right, of the adoption. But my daughter was already asking some questions that we didn't want to not tell her the truth. And so the great part about these books is that I've used some of these books myself. So along with writing them, I've used them personally. And this book, and the book around adoption, I read the book and I said at the end, so that book has a ladybug, and I said, Riley, you're like Lola, the ladybug. And she started to have reactions that they usually say happen at 7, but we were prepared for it. So the one thing I do want to say about these books is, they're kind of like the first step, I say, and then we have a lot of different resource materials on our website too to help, because you mentioned siblings, right? You mentioned some other scenarios that families will go through. And so I wanted to make sure we captured all of that. So we do have the books, and then we have some reference materials that we also include on our website.
Now, in your series of books, you have more than just this one, The Bug Who Lost His Buzz. What other books do you have in this series already?
Yeah. So we have other books. I will say this first book is in publication. We have others that are being published right now. But they are, we go through a process. So our first thing is we pray, right? We pray of, what is needed out there. We also definitely look at suggestions from our readers. So, one of our books that, as I said, is in the production process right now is around moving. Because the illustrator, so she's a military family, her family, she said moving, of course, is a big topic, right, in military. The other thing that we look at, along with praying, and look at, personal scenarios. So, I already mentioned the adoption book, because that's, of course, personal, right, to me personally. The volunteering with the children with cancer, was our initial book. But we also look at what's big into the news and what's really impacting this age group. And so, unfortunately, you hear bullying a lot, right? And childhood suicide rates, unfortunately, continue to rise. And so we also wrote a book around bullying, which we are looking to have that be our next book, just because it's a critical topic right now. But and lastly, as I said, we look at readers. So we've had lots of readers write to me about losing a pet. And so I wrote a book around losing a pet. So, we are looking to have this series be ongoing. My hope is that readers will write to us and say, this is personally going on with my family, and can you write a book about it? So that we are capturing the hearts of families, across the globe.
Understood. Are all the books faith-based?
Yes. So what I say to audiences, and this is probably my number one question, is why did we incorporate faith? And I think we did it beautifully. So if you look at the book, even this first book, we have different Bible verses that we use in picture frames, and different things along the book that deals with the topics that are happening. We felt, I will say this, that the number one question around faith is, why did you incorporate faith? And I felt like it would be an injustice if we didn't, because families going through these scenarios need hope, right? Yes. And I believe the only way you have hope is if you have faith. So, these books do go through some of the universal questions that even individuals struggling with their faith or don't have faith at the period of time can relate to, but I also felt like we needed to intertwine the faith messages within the books.
We're talking with Kristen Barnett, author of The Bug Who Thought He Lost His Buzz, What Happens When the Big Bad Beast Stings, as part of their first in the series, and tied this release to September being Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and this book is to how to explain to your child or to siblings in the family that your child has cancer and how to cross that with them in an interactive style, very well illustrated, and very much a book that's going to bring confidence and healing for the families to address the huge elephant in the room as how do you explain to your young child that they're about to embark on a journey, and it may be a scary journey, but they're going to find comfort in these pages. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back from that break, we're going to dig into more about the thought behind this series, the content of this series, and about this book in particular, and return back with Kristen Barnett in just a short while. Back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Back. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. In honor of September being Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, we have a special guest on to talk to us about her book, The Bug Who Thought He Lost His Buzz, What Happens When the Big Bad Beast Stings. The big bad beast is cancer, and this is something that's affecting families. This book is written for parents to be able to equip their children to understand the journey. And while it ministers to the children, it also ministers to the parents. Author is Kristen Barnett, and the illustrator is Cindy Calzada. And we want to welcome Kristen back to the program. Welcome back.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Kristen, all of your books in this series, and there are more to come, can be found, well, this particular book is the one that's out in the market today and is available for purchase. But you have a ministry, and this ministry is focused on the whole concept of the birth of the series in addressing issues that affect children and how to engage parents to effectively engage their children in a dialogue as to how to navigate through the litany of issues that are facing children today. And this is kind of the mandate of your ministry. What is that ministry, and how have you formed it, and what are you doing with it? Because I know you are donating books, you are donating proceeds, you are really taking this as a ministry and not as a way to sell 50 million books and become
Exactly.
you know, the #1 best-selling children's author in the world and buying a big house for yourself and your family on the proceeds.
Yeah. So love how you said this. I mean, the books are really a tool for us, right? I mean, we've actually had different organizations come to us and talk about, either other products that maybe we can align with these books. We're not doing that yet, but you're right. It's a ministry, right? We want to provide the tools that are going to best meet families in where they are, right? Both in their faith and going through difficult scenarios. And so through that ministry, yes, we're doing a lot more than just books, right? So I'm out all the time. I mean, this week I'm actually at a women's leadership conference, talking through both Cancer Awareness Month, right, and helping families. I've also been doing things with Ronald McDonald House, really partnering, especially, I mean, we continue those partnerships, especially within September and October, since they are Cancer Awareness Months. And you're right, that's just this first book, but then, other books, like our next book, Bullying. I've already had some of the schools have me come in with some of their bullying prevention programs. And so it's definitely a ministry. Now, some of the things, that we've done as a group, it's really been our readers, I will say, that have led us to doing some of the things that we're doing. And so, first of all, you mentioned this donate a book to a child. And that came about because I was at different book readings, library readings, like all across, different venues. And I had people say, what if my family's not going through this, but I would love to help a family? And so that's really what was the birth of this whole Donate a Book. And so readers can actually go on our website again, www.watts, which is spelled like a firefly, WATTS, buggingyou.com. and they can buy a book and donate it, and they can actually even write a personal message, and this will be given to a family in a hospital. So, and when I say in a hospital, we're looking to, we're already partnered with some hospitals, but we want to make this global and worldwide, right? So that's kind of our goal, is to get these books into the right hands. The other thing we're doing is we are providing a percentage of proceeds back, because I'm definitely in this fight, right? I mean, I've sat with families as they've cried and hugged and asked some of those tough questions. And so, to your point, these books aren't about me, right? These books are about how can we continue to research, fight cancer, and some of the other topics that we're dealing with. And so we have this program where we're providing a percentage of proceeds back to organizations that are both in the midst of research and day in and day out with these kiddos. And so those are some special things that the audience can get engaged with now.
Kristen, this isn't really a classical children's book, and
Yep.
it's not really a classical adult book. So it's almost in a genre of its own, and
Yep.
it's for the parents to interact with their child. And because of the way you've structured it, you actually are able to personalize it. There are blanks in the book to complete. There are stories in here that are relatable, that are personalized to the child, so that the parent is involved and engaged. But it's not the Cat in the Hat. It's not
Right.
it's not green eggs and ham. It's not for the pure entertainment and enjoyment of a child to encourage their reading, which most children's books would be geared towards. These are actually tools for the equipping of the saints to be able to address in a way that is unique, creative, and identifiable at the level of the child's ability to perceive and receive and identify with not only the message that is the bad news,
Yeah.
you have cancer, but the good news that God's in control and that there's no reason to be afraid, and the message that we want to convey to them, that they're not alone, that we're going to be with you through this, and that listen, I would expect a 5-year-old to ask the question, am I going to die?
Yep.
And these are the kind of hard questions that you've taken on the challenge to address, that I know even my own spirit cringes when I think about looking into the eyes of a 5-year-old that I've just explained to them through the story of the bug who thought he lost his buzz. And the child has processed this like that old prayer, now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, if I should die before I wake. When I was a little child, that was a prayer that I was told to say, and it kept me up at night, because what registered with me was, if I go to sleep, then there's a chance that I'll die.
Right.
So I was not a very good sleeper as a child, because this seed had been planted in me that if I should die before I wake, well, I can handle that. The answer to that question is just don't go to sleep. All right? And you solve that problem. You've given me the problem, you've given me the solution. So I was a hard to get to sleep child, because I was being basically programmed to think, because of the way my mind works. I picked up on that at a very early age. And so I would say that prayer, but I would sit up with a flashlight at night, hiding under my covers, still and quiet, but reading a comic book or whatever it was I was doing at the time, because I didn't want to go to sleep, because I didn't want to die.
Right. So you said some very key things. I think first of all, you said, your audience is really parents, right, along with children, and a kind of whole new genre. agree with you. Like, we spent a lot of time making these books appeasing to children. So we have things such as finding Watts right in the book. So each of the pages, we have very colorful rhymes, sounds, things like that, that we spend a lot of time with in regards to children. A lot of our books also incorporate what I would say fun facts around bugs in some of the books. But then, from a parent's perspective, we wanted to make sure that they had the tools, right? And so we have like a glossary of terms right at the end of the book. Being a parent myself to a third grader, love that. And then we also, as again, have some resources on our website that can continue to help parents with, kind of Bible studies around these topics, prayers, things like that. But the other thing you mentioned, which I want to address, as you said, going to bed and having to, be afraid of, am I going to wake up right in the morning? We purposely wanted to take scary scenarios, such as cancer, but make it, and not say make it less scary, but we wanted to use symbolisms that children could resonate with. And so, in this book, we follow a bee named Bugsy, and he at the beginning of the book, he says, I've lost my buzz, and he goes to the hospital, and he finds out he has the big bad beast, which is cancer. But we purposely use symbolisms in the book, because I think they're things kids can relate to. And so, on one of the pages, it's just like David with the slingshot and the beast. And I have to admit, a lot of kids that I hear about, so for my readers, the number one thing I hear is that kids love the beast. And so even though the beast, is meaning cancer in this story, it's something that kids want to read about, relate to. And we spent a lot of time doing that so that we could both be there for parents, but be there for children.
I'm looking at the glossary because you mentioned it, so I turned to it because I wanted to see exactly what you were referring to. And it's actually more than a glossary. A glossary might be terms which are maybe medical in nature or diagnostic in nature, and you're trying to explain it, but that's not what you've done. You've actually defined alone, being all by yourself, or explaining what a beehive is, or what to believe means, to know something is true, or the word diminish. Well, to a 5-year-old, that's not in their vocabulary, so you're able to explain to them it means it gets smaller. And so you've given the parent the ability to educate as well as to comfort and to nurture and to come alongside of the child, as opposed to being the deliverer of news. They're now the tour guide on a journey through how we're going to navigate and what are the sights, sounds, and you talk about the sounds. What is a buzz? You've actually taken it to a new level, explaining what a sting is, explaining what it means to soar, explaining what prayer is. This is much more. You also list Bible verses referred to in the book so that the parents know exactly where it is. And then you have resources and support tools linking back to the website. So this actually becomes a story that can be told in the explanation, and your bug mission, as you talk about in the very beginning, is a series of books and products aimed at helping parents talk through real-life scenarios. Terminal illness, adoption, moving, divorce, disabilities. With your young children, 2 to 7-year-olds is the range, and this is the hard to explain to what you're going through, because it becomes their new norm.
Yeah.
If they're 2 years old and they're in the hospital and their playground is in the hospital and the IV pole is a part of what their norm is, it's very hard to let them know there's a disconnect there. They don't remember being home, and especially if it's a longer term, bone marrow involved, 8-month, 9-month, 10-month hospital stay, and they see children coming in the early stages, and those children have hair, and those children are walking alone and unassisted, and those children are coming in to begin the treatment process. They look in the mirror and they see that they are noticeably and physically different than some of the other children that they're interacting with, and that's where a lot of the disconnect takes place and where explanation is necessary, because we are a comparative society. We are wired to observe, and then because we are self-centered, they do look in a mirror and they've lost all their hair and they are hooked up to an IV, and there's other children that aren't at that particular stage in their treatment process. So it really is necessary to bring them comfort and understanding through a way that they can relate to. So I compliment you that you have addressed this way.
Well, thank you. And I want to, just to your example, so like one of the pages of the book, I'm just going to read this little part because I think, so around the medicine, so Bugsy is saying, we will take our medicine, puff up our chest, you keep being brave and count on me to do the rest. So, he's having a conversation with God at this point. And then on the wall, we have Deuteronomy 31, 6, do not fear, God is with you. And, I am purposely, like, I would have loved, some of the scenarios that I was going through, right, when, and if we had other children, right, going through with the miscarriages that I mentioned earlier, having something like this where it has, like, the verses that deal with what kids are going through right at that point in time. So talking through norms, right, and feelings, and I think that was important. One thing I want to say, which I think you're going to think is very interesting, and I thought was very interesting, is at the hospital they did a survey, and they did it with kids of all different stages, right? Kids that just found out that they had cancer, to kids that were in remission, to kids that were going through, certain phases of the cancer, right, like having to do bone marrow treatments and so forth. And they said, one of the questions was, would you have wished away the cancer? Do you wish you didn't go through the process of cancer? And you would assume 100% of the kids would say, well, yes, of course, I wish I didn't have the cancer. And, I believe, just like with my journey with God, like I know God had me go through the miscarriages, had me, because I've been able to help other families and really, resonated with kids and wanting to help kids through that scenario. And so I hear the kids saying the same thing. They said, no, I would not have wished the cancer away, but they said it for different reasons, right? So some of the kids said, no, because I've gotten closer to my faith. No, because my family and I are better connected. No, because this is probably the biggest thing I'm ever going to have to fight, and if I can fight this, I can fight anything, right? No, because I find out who my true friends are. And so the amazing part with kids, and it makes me teary-eyed, is they're very resilient, and they're also very willing. I mean, I can't tell you how many kids that I saw that were in a different stage of cancer wheeling a kid that had cancer in a wagon down the hall, I can't tell you how many kids go through treatment and they're in the playroom, with a bucket because they're not feeling good, but they're still playing, right? And so, I want to put that out there because I think these kids and these families are angels, and I do agree with you. They learn a new norm, but it's beautiful to, like, look at their journey, as they're living that new norm.
Because you have a faith component to the book,
Yeah.
Can people without faith and don't have a faith foundation, can they connect with these books as well?
Yeah, yeah. So that's probably one of the number one questions, right? I keep being asked, and I will start with the faith component, and then kind of answer your question around, individuals that, of course, either are struggling with their faith, because you get a lot of those families too, right? That are just like, um, I I'm mad at God right now, going through something like this, and so. I. I will say that we purposely did incorporate and interweave faith in these books because I believe that uh, to have hope, you have to have faith. And I think I said that before, so I felt like it was critical to have faith. But I also feel that we have some universal messages in here that families that don't have faith can still relate to. And so, we did that on purpose. We also, started our website and our community because we want to help some of those families that are struggling with their faith at the period of time, which I think is important, which is part of this. And so I do want to say families that don't have their faith, please, still check out these books. But I do feel like faith is a key component when you're trying to manage these scenarios.
Let's define for the audience what you're talking about faith. Are we talking about Jesus? Or are we talking about God?
Yeah. So good question. Good question. Because I have purposely had conversations in this book with God, right? Because I think a lot of kids, especially at those ages, are relating more to God than they are to Jesus. However, I believe that, obviously through my own faith, I believe Jesus still walks this earth, right? And so I feel, these books are mainly, as I said, focused on God. But I do think when you get into some of the resource materials on my site and some of the Bible studies and things like that, Jesus is engaged in some of those.
I think that's what will make this book more universal to the God concept as opposed to the Christian concept, although we are a Christian broadcasting program. As we reach across the aisle, I'm Jewish. I'm a Jewish believer. I don't know that in my, I came to faith when my daughter was 4. So, I don't know that I would have picked up a book that had Jesus as a part of it. But I would pick up a book that God was a part of. And it crosses, it actually increases the size of the audience. Not that I would ever diminish in any way or even counsel to say, don't make it about Jesus. If you are looking for the larger audience, then God, and then the church groups and the support groups and the opportunities to share your testimony all come about through that without eliminating any particular group where your approach is non-discriminatory, that this book should be as appropriate for a Muslim family who is going through cancer with their child as it is for a Hindu family going through cancer with their child. So I look at this as being God-centered and biblically true, quoting from both the Old and New Testaments, but a sensitivity in a certain way towards making sure that you are not excluding, because cancer does not discriminate.
No, it does not. You're right. Yes.
We applaud you keeping faith, and again, that then brings about: is this a Christian children's book or Christian's adult book for children, or exactly what particular approach, of course, do you take with it? And that's something you and a publisher, of course, will make that decision. We've been talking with Kristen Barnett, and unfortunately we've run out of time. We've been talking about the bug who thought he lost his buzz, what happens when the big bad beast stings, the first in a series of books about bugs and real life challenges for children ages 2 through 7. Kristen, thank you so much for sharing the vision and the story with us here on Revealing the Truth. May God bless all the works of your hands.
Well, thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. All right. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.